Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. The topic of the second lecture is research to publication by my very own teacher and my mentor, I would say, Dr. Vasudev Ballal. A very warm welcome to you, sir. It is also my absolute pleasure to introduce our moderator of this session, Dr. Amrita Chawla, Professor, Discipline of Endodontics, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. I kindly request you to introduce our speaker and moderate this session, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. From the financial aspect of research, which we clinicians are unaware of, thank you to Ruchika, to another pertinent topic of bringing our research to actual publication, actually showcase our hard work. Who other is better than speak on it is other than Dr. Vasudev Ballal. Well, to talk about him, he's a Bachelor of Dentistry from SDM College of Dental Sciences, and he did his master's from in the Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics from Manipal College of Dental Sciences. He further did his PhD in endodontics from the Manipal College of Dental Sciences, Manipal, and currently holds a professor position in the same specialty. He has collaborated with renowned international universities and conducted about 45 projects. And apart from being busy in academics, he's also been busy with being an editorial board member in 25 international as well as national journals. He also holds a position of associate editor of BMC Oral Health and Journal of Conservative Dentistry. And he's the only Indian who reviewed the best reviewer. He got the best reviewer award of top 10 percentile in the world by American Association of Endodontics and Elsewhere Publisher in 2014 and 2016. He has published 150 international publications and 25 national publications. And he has worked on root canal irrigants, and he was the first to explore the use of malic acid as a root canal irrigant in the endodontic specialty. I can go on and on about Dr. Ballal, but it's better to hear from him directly. Over to you, Dr. Ballal.
Thank you. I'll do my screen sharing.
Yeah.
You can see my screen?
Yes, Dr. Ballal, we can see it, please.
I'd like to thank Dr. Chawla for those kind words of introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Mahalakshmi Madam and her team, Dr. Rajkumar, Dr. Sujana, and my very close and dearest friend, Dr. Karthik, for all the support what you have provided me. And I'm very happy to participate in this FDP program. I think this is a very good initiative taken by Dr. Mahalakshmi Madam and her team, because we need to train our young endodontist who is budding up in their career now. Because as Dr. Ruchika said, there are a lot of areas for research and grants which needs to be addressed, and a lot of things needs to be addressed for a junior faculty who are budding up. I think this is a very good platform for all of the junior faculty who are attending this program. So I also like to thank IACDE because this program is associated with IACDE for giving me this opportunity. So coming on to the topic, Mahalakshmi Madam has told me to talk about, she told what is the real problem which is existing. That is, there will be a lot of publications, thesis which is being done, but it is not getting published. So I thought that is an apt topic for me, because whatever I am talking today, I think we can have a discussion later if time permits. It is basically based on my thoughts as a reviewer, as an author, and also as an associate editor of few of the journals, because I review a lot of articles for reputed journals. So whatever I share today is basically my thoughts, based on my review. I will just tell you what are the things where we need to address when we send our thesis to a reputed journal for publication. So the first question is why is it so difficult to publish? Because if you ask me again, I'll tell you, because in all my talks, I ask this question to audience, is it difficult to publish? So if you ask me, it is not at all difficult to publish nowadays, because money talks. Publication has become basically a business now. So if you have money, for doing research, I think you can easily publish your paper in a good journal also. But the problem is that journal, what you're publishing, it may not be a reputed journal. That is why I really want to stress on this factor, because publishing in a reputed journal, you need to have a lot of other things which you need to think of. So my talk is basically how you want to publish. When you publish in a reputed journal, what you need to think of. So why is it so difficult? I think all the senior faculty who is attending this program, this FDP program now, or listening to my lectures, I think every one of you have been tried publishing in a reputed journal in our specialty, and most of you have succeeded, and some may not have succeeded. So, but there are junior people, junior faculty members who have joined the department or who are just starting their research career. I think for them, it will be a very useful, it might be useful, my lecture. So why it is difficult to publish is because one thing you should understand now, the pressure on the journals is tremendous compared to, 10 years back or 15 years back when we sent our thesis for publication compared to now. Because the pressure on the journals is so much that, they only select the best of the best. You should always remember that, because sometimes we feel, I've done a lot of good study, like, a lot of parameters I have included. I've done a very good study. That is what we think. But when it goes to journal, it gets rejected because one thing is the pressure, because there are articles which are best of the best, which gets published. Second thing, advancement in technologies. As Ruchika mentioned in her lecture, the technology is expanding day by day. So we need to keep ourselves updated with the latest technology when we do any type of study and we send for publication. Otherwise, outrightly, it will get rejected. The third thing is the poor study design. Okay, I want to stress this because before I talk how you have to write a paper, I want to stress this one thing, that is the study design. Because majority of the articles, as I see, as a reviewer or whatever I see, it gets rejected because of the poor study design, what we do. And second, the last thing is the lack of novelty. This novelty and study design, we have to think 10 times before we start doing our study. So I want to give some of the tips before directly going into how to write a paper. Some tips we need to think before we start writing a paper. So the first thing, as I said, ask yourself, the study, what you are going to do before you do a study, does it have originality or novelty? Do you have something new to say to the public domain? So if you feel there is nothing new what you are doing, it is better you don't do that type of study, and then you'll be in a very difficult position to publish it and you get disheartened. But the basic problem is you need to think whether you have something new to say or is your study novel. That is the first thing, ask yourself. So sometimes, a lot of people come and tell me, like in our department, when we sir, we are not getting anything new to do. All the materials has been tested. What area should I do research? So it is not like always you need to use a new material or new equipment and you have to do something new research. There are some criteria which you can think of, which merits originality. The first thing is extending or elaborating on an existing piece of work. As Dr. Ruchika said, again, I stress, I completely believe in her. We do one part of the research and we leave it then and there, and we will jump for other topic. Rather, we can extend the same piece of work in a different direction. That is one. That is also an originality. Second thing, developing a new product or improving on an existing one. Again, same thing. You have a same old product. You have done some study on that. Try to do something else, some other parameters on the same product which is available or which is existing. That is also originality. Reinterpreting an existing theory in a different context. So in a different context, you can propose a hypothesis of an existing problem. That also merits for originality. Using different methodological approach to address a problem. So you might have a same problem existing. For example, pain after root canal treatment. So this is a common problem what we all endodontists face. But what are the different approaches where we can take where we can address this
Next
problem?
speaker,
So we can do a lateral thinking on this. That also makes originality. The next parameter is repeating research in other contexts. That is different country. For example, this usually happens in a medical research. For example, vaccine research. A vaccine which is very effective in one country need not be effective in other country in different ethnics. So using the same vaccine in different country, that also is an original study. Taking a particular technique or idea and applying in a new area. This is what we usually call as off-label studies or off-label trials. We can use some different method, in different material in different area. That also meets originality. Conducting a study on previously unresearched area or topic. And the last, taking a different approach for an existing problem. This is what I said, always we need to think laterally, because most of the time what we think is only in one direction. You always need to think laterally or lateral direction for solving a problem. So all these criteria meets originality. So please ask yourself whether the study, what you're doing is something new or does it have some originality in it. The second thing is selecting your right journal to publish. This is also very important. Before you start writing your manuscript, think about it. Aim at the journal which have more citation. Now everybody talks about impact factor. I think this is a buzzword in all the colleges in India, also in abroad, impact factor. But if you ask me, or if you ask a reputed researcher in any field, they always say you select a journal which has more citation. I agree, when there is a citation is more, the impact factor of the journals also will be more, but it is always better to go behind citation so that your work will be cited more. And second thing, identify the audience whom you are going to address your problem. This is again the common mistake what we do when we send our publication. Because in our endo, we do research which can fit into a specialty journal as well as a general dentistry journal. See, for some of the examples I have quoted here, if you are comparing to effectiveness of two desensitizing agents, we endo people do this, perio people do this, okay, this is a common thing. But when we do such type of studies, it is better this study is being sent to a general dentistry journal rather than specific endodontic journal. Second example, I'll tell you, a study comparing efficacy of two local drug delivery systems. See, if somebody is doing research like this is typical to perio. I'm just giving this, not endo study, I'm just giving you an example how we have to select a journal. So like this, there are several examples I have written here. We need to think where we have to send our publication, to which journal. It is very, very important, because if you send a general dentistry topic to any specific endo journal, outrightly it will get rejected. You will be wasting so much of time drafting the manuscript, uploading it, and within half an hour it will come back telling this manuscript does not fit our journal. So always think which journal you have to send. If you are in a doubt, you can ask your peers, you can ask other research colleagues, or nobody gives an answer. If you're not convinced, directly email the editor. If the journal is reputed, within half an hour or within 10 minutes also sometimes, you might get a response from the editor telling whether this manuscript fits their journal or not. The next thing what you have to think before you send your manuscript is guidelines or instruction. Most of us neglect this. We are so busy that we don't have time to read the guidelines of the journal when we are sending. You have to read the journal guidelines, and also when you read, make sure you are reading a revised format of the journal, because the guidelines keeps changing in the journal. So don't read around 5 years old edition of a journal which you are going to send. Always read the latest edition of the journal, the revised guidelines. Read few papers which is already published in that journal. It will be very helpful for you when you write your manuscript. Read some papers which are published in the journal which you are going to send. Otherwise, editors simply reject your manuscript because of the inappropriate format. Remember that. So much of time waste. Okay, so be careful when you start writing your paper. Third, the other next thing what you need to think is the language. I think this is a very problematic issue for most of us Indian authors in any specialty. The common comment what you get is English language, very poor English. This is one of the common thing. So classical example, if you can say, if you want me to say, is the Chinese researchers. Most of the Chinese researchers, even in endo, what we see, the study is so good. The molecular level study, what they do is very good. But if you see their original draft, the English will be very, very poor. Because I have worked with some of the Chinese researchers. I know how their language is, and as well as I know how their work is. Their work is too good, but their language is very poor. So, if that is the case, again, there will be outrightly rejection. So it is always better you have a help from any native English speakers if you know anyone in abroad, or the best thing is you can just send your manuscript for a editing services. There are a lot of editing services. The main thing what you should remember is don't mix British and American English. These are the two common type of English what we use. For example, dentin versus dentin. See the spelling. You can see what is the spelling of dentin and dentin. It's different. So don't mix American and English, British English. These are some of the commonly used, editing service. It is all paid service, but it is still worth you send your manuscript for this editing service in case if you feel your language is not good enough. Next, grammar and style. You have to pay attention to all these basic things. Introduction, methods, results, how you write, in which tense you write, because it might look very small issue, but it might be the sole cause for rejection of your paper because of your poor grammar, poor writing style, and the poor English. As you can see the cartoon in this picture, okay, do not use big words. Don't use jargons, okay? You should remember when we publish our paper, we want someone to read and cite our paper. It is not just read. We need them to cite our paper. So don't use big words, okay? See, this is one of the example. I'll be showing you a lot of examples throughout my this presentation. It is all from the papers which I have got for review. Okay, there are some good examples, there are some bad examples which I'm going to show. Okay, this is again one of the journal I've got. Okay, it is not a dental journal, but just see this abstract. This is an abstract. If you read this abstract, you cannot understand anything what is written in this. They have used that high English that you cannot understand anything. So it should not be like this. So the simplest way is to give very simple message. So remember, when you say what you mean what you say, and don't use big words. You might have a very good, English language, but that you can use while talking to someone. But while writing a scientific paper, be simple. The next thing what you need to remember in your mind is the timing of writing the manuscript. It is also very important. When will you write? Because you cannot write a paper when you are very bored or when you are sleepy or when you are excited. There are studies done like, all these minor things which will matter when you draft a manuscript. So see that when you write a manuscript, you are in your best mood. Okay, you are fresh. Otherwise, the way of writing also might get deteriorated. As I said, the last, send for editing services. Okay, it is better you send it for any professional editing service, or you can give the paper to someone who is always well versed with writing a manuscript and get it edited. Next is you have to pay attention to the guidelines. Okay, this is also very important. Now in our endo specialties, there are a lot of guidelines which have come up, especially for reputed journals like IEJ or JOE. JOE doesn't take some guidelines, but Journal of Dentistry, all these journals, they take up a lot of guidelines. So we have a standard, all these guidelines, what I have mentioned here. Apart from that, all these PRIDE guidelines, which recently International Journal of Endodontics have been, they have come up with all these guidelines. So whenever you publish any study in reputed journal, go through these guidelines and see that your article follows all the guidelines which have been given instruction for that journal. Otherwise, again, outrightly, your article will get rejected. And when you do clinical studies, please pay attention to all the government guidelines, that is ICMR, ICHGCP, Indian GCP, all these guidelines you have to read, because these are all very important when you draft a manuscript, especially when you do a clinical trial. So telling all this, these are all the things which you should keep in mind before you start drafting your manuscript. Now, once all this is set, now we'll go like how you have to prepare your manuscript for submission. So you should remember one thing. Okay, before you start writing your manuscript, there is a difference of writing a thesis and writing a manuscript. Okay, it is not only based on the breadth of writing, but also it depends upon the style of writing, the concise, how concisely you write, how clear it is, and how structured it is. In a thesis, like, we write volumes and volumes. You cannot copy the same thing and send it for publication. I get a lot of manuscripts, I know, and it is typically, it looks like an Indian author, where the entire thesis is sent for publication as a manuscript. It gets rejected then and there. So remember, writing thesis is different, writing manuscript is different. You have to be very, very specific when you write a manuscript. So every one of us know what are the structure of a manuscript. This is the basic structure of a manuscript, which starts from the title, abstract, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So I will go through every individual part, how you need to address this, every individual part of a skeleton of the paper. So when you talk about the title, okay, remember your title should be used to hook up the reader's attention or the editor's attention. See, this is one of the frame line which I have directly taken from the editor of a reputed journal, Nature. See what he has said. Usually I have a look at the title. If interested, then I go for the abstract. If it is not interesting, I just forget it. So just imagine, they will never go and read your abstract also. They will just see the title. And if they feel there is something interesting, then only they will go for the abstract. Then they might send you an article for review. This is what I said, because the pressure on the journals, reputed journals, are so high. Even the editor may not have time to go through all the journals abstract, the manuscript abstract. So sometimes looking at the title itself, if they feel this manuscript is not good, they might reject then and there. So pay attention to the title. So as said, how your title should be when you draft a manuscript. Usually it should be brief, but it should be descriptive and clear. It should concisely and accurately describe the content of the paper to your audience. What is there in your paper should be reflected when an audience or when a reader reads your paper. Do not claim things in the title which are not delivered in the manuscript. What study you have done, claim only those things in the title. Do not keep it too long and complicated, nor too short and less informative. I will show you some of the examples of the title. See, these are all the examples of the title from the manuscript which I have got for review from our endo journals. See the first title, Effectiveness of Two Irrigating Solutions Using SCM. If you read this title, you will never understand what the study is about. It is very defective or very short. Instead, it could have been modified as effectiveness of phytic acid and itidronic acid. This is the two acids they used in this study in smear layer removal using scanning electron microscope, because they did the study using these two acids to see its ability to remove the smear layer using SCM. So if the title would have been modified like this, then it would have been better. So like that, I have given some more other examples. See the last example, citric acid, an alternative for removal of root filling materials. See, if you read this title, you will never know what the study is about. The exact study, what they have done is to see the cleansing ability and the micro hardness of root canal dentin when they have used citric acid and xylol. So that should have been reflected in the title, so that when a reader reads the title, he or she will come to know what your study is about. So this is all the very deficient title. The other common mistake what we do when we write a title is using acronyms or abbreviation. You can use abbreviation in your manuscript, but not in the title. Do not use any abbreviation in the title, because a reader will never know what it is about. See, these are all some of the common examples I have highlighted in the red. Okay, CaOCl2. CaOCl2 means, a person who doesn't know chemistry may not know anything. So don't use those abbreviations like CaOCl2. Similarly, you can see the next thing, okay, SCM, EDX, TEM. You never know what is SCM, EDX, TEM. The new reader may not know what all these abbreviations are. HTDP, NaOCl. NaOCl, even though it is a common terminology, some of them may not know, the beginners. So don't use all these acronyms in the title. The next thing what you should remember is the word count. Every journal, you will have some word count for the title. Do not exceed that. Next comes the abstract. Yeah, next comes the abstract. Abstract is a miniature manuscript in its own right. Remember that most common part of your manuscript read is the abstract. By reading the abstract, many of us will try to see whether we need to read this article or not. So that is why the abstract is very, very important part of your manuscript. It should be understood without reading your entire manuscript. When we read the abstract, we should know what the entire manuscript is about. It should convey most significant findings and important implications of your work which has been reported. Do not cram your abstract with information. Do not load or do not write a lot of things in your abstract. Keep it very brief. Again, do not use any abbreviations because most of the journals will say some specific word count for your abstract. So you cannot exceed that. So see that your abstract is brief, but it gives the complete information about your study. You should remember, abstract is the only way in which your research reaches other scientists by search of database. So when you want to do any new research project, we usually go in search, either Google or PubMed or whichever database, we go and search for the articles. So when we search, the first thing what we see is read the abstract. So by reading the abstract, we'll come to know about the study, and on top, based on that, we will decide whether we need to select this study for our project or not. So remember, this is the only way your study will be read by other people. That is why abstract is very, very important part of your manuscript. For clinical trial, if you are doing a clinical trial in the reputed journal, they tell you to write the clinical trial registry number in the end of the abstract. So you need to remember this. And always remember, write abstract in the last. After drafting the entire manuscript, then write the abstract, because you will know what is your entire study about. So once you have a complete idea about your study, then it is easy to write an abstract. So when you write an abstract, pay attention to two things. One is the type of abstract. There is the commonly used two types of structure of the abstract is structured and non-structured. Some journals say structured, some journals say non-structured. Okay, based on that, you draft your abstract. Again, the word count also matters. Stick onto the word count what each journal says. Do not exceed the word count. And nowadays, most of the journals will also ask for a graphical abstract. That is your abstract to be designed in a way of a picture, in a graph like. Okay, this is the example. This is not a dental example. It is taken from a medical journal. But see that whenever a journal is asking for the graphical abstract, see that you give a good 3D dimension or good graphical abstract, because all these things are the one which will attract the reviewer or the editor so that they can accept your paper for publication. The next part of the paper is the introduction. So introduction, when you write, see that it is the shortest part of your paper. Don't write too much of words in your introduction, how you write your thesis. In thesis, usually the student will write 4 or 5 pages of introduction. That should not happen in case of a manuscript. Keep it short. Introduction should never be a review. As I said, don't put the entire thesis introduction for your paper. Introduction should not be a review. Mention in the introduction, the very, very important thing what you need to think is the rationale of the study. Most of the time, your manuscript will be rejected because in the introduction, you will never say what is the rationale of your study, why you need to do the study. So when I say rationale or the relevance, these 3 things you need to remember. Why your study need to be done, that you have to highlight very much. If you don't highlight this part, then the reviewer outrightly will say there is nothing new in this study. Second thing, why your observation need to be reported. Third thing, why it is important to a reader to read on. So these 3 things you have to remember, which accounts for the relevance or the rationale of your study. So this part you have to clearly highlight in your introduction part of the manuscript. See, I will tell you some of again, these are all the examples which I have picked up from the review articles which I have got for review from the reputed journals. Okay, see some of the good rationale. Efficacy of ultrasonic and laser activation on reduction of the biofilm from an isthmus model in an acrylic tooth. See, there is a good rationale because in endodontics, most of us know it is very difficult to clean an isthmus. So in this study, they evaluated for 2 irrigant activation system to clean the isthmus. So they have a good rationale to do this because the problem is still in thing where you have a problem. See the second and third example, that is B and C, cholesterol level and caries rate progression. This was the study which I got for review. Okay, so see, there is no rationale at all because there is no evidence to say cholesterol level and caries progression. So they have just randomly done this study and they proved in the end there is no coincidence between these 2. This is a poor rationale. When you don't have any evidence, don't do such type of studies. See the example C, calcium hydroxide, effect of calcium hydroxide on Porphyria monas gingivalis in root canals. See, again, it is very well known fact, calcium hydroxide is not effective against Porphyria monas gingivalis. There are so many studies to prove this. On top of it, again, you are proving the same concept. That means there is, again, it is a poor rationale for doing your study. The relevance is very, very poor. In such case, your manuscript will get rejected. The other things what you need to remember is do thorough literature search. It is very, very important before you start doing your study, do a thorough literature search so that you will get enough information to write in your introduction part. Mention the objectives of the study in detail if you have multiple objectives. Mention the hypothesis of the study tested. Most of the studies quote a null or an alternative hypothesis, which can be quoted in your introduction. Mention the full form of abbreviations in the introduction. So when you write introduction, always write all the abbreviations which are there in your manuscript and its full form. Keep the references as minimal as possible in the introduction part and always have a good flow. So when you read the introduction, each paragraph what you are writing should be connected. There should be always a good flow when you write an introduction. So if you, in general, the introduction is nothing but it is like an inverted triangle where the base of the triangle forms the majority part of your introduction. That is the complete background, why you are doing this study. The complete background information you have to put in the beginning of your introduction, which will be your bulk portion. Next, you need to address the problem, why you are doing this study now. That is the relevance or the rationale. The last thing is the aim. State the aim of your study, where you have to drive the reader or the reviewer to your part of the introduction. So it is usually in an inverted triangle. So this is how you need to write an introduction in your manuscript. The next portion or the next part of a manuscript is a material and method. This is, if you ask me, this is the easiest section to write in a manuscript, and it is always a good idea also to start writing this portion of the manuscript at beginning. Because when you write a methodology, you are 100% sure, because if you have done the study, you will know completely what you have done. So writing methodology, if you ask me, is the easiest portion, okay? But at the same time, remember, from a reviewer perspective, this section is most often responsible for outright rejection of your manuscript. Because this is the area where a reviewer will completely identify what are the flaws in your manuscript, flaws or the good advantage. Okay, while reading your methodology, if you have done a poor study, it will easily, it can get rejected. So when you are writing a methodology, you have to pay a lot of attention. One thing is, describe clearly how the essays were done or how the different parameters have done. So write in depth in the methodology. If the reviewers or the editor says to cut down, then still it is okay. But write as much as information in the methodology, not in the introduction or the discussion. So write in depth in the methodology so that the reviewer will understand your manuscript in detail. Follow the guidelines. As I said in my previous slides, there are a lot of guidelines when you are doing both clinical or lab-based studies. Follow all the guidelines. Mention the trial registry number in the methodology. If you are doing a clinical trial, if you are writing a manuscript on a clinical trial, give reference to established methods, but describe the methodology in brief. Sometimes what we do, the methodology, what we do might be a common technique, what we follow from so many other similar previous studies. So the common mistake what we write is the methodology what is done by is similar to previous authors, and we quote a reference. You can quote a reference, but write the methodology in brief. You need not write in depth or in detail, but in brief you have to write. Quoting only the reference is not appropriate, because remember, a busy reviewer will never have time to again go and cross-check the methodology, what you have written, and read it, okay? They will outrightly give the comment telling your methodology part, what you have written is very poor. So don't do that. Always write the methodology in brief if you are giving a reference or if you're citing any other previous used technique. Clearly mention inclusion and exclusion criteria. Mention the sample size calculation in detail. Recently because I am one of the editorial board member of our prestigious journal in our specialty, International Endodontic Journal, IACDE. Recently, we had an editorial meet. In that, the common thing, what the important thing, what was discussed is the sample size, how, authors write. The statistician of the IACDE had discussed this topic. It was a very good, actually, topic to discuss. They told the sample size, most of the authors do not write in detail. So that is why I have mentioned this clearly. When you write a sample size, see that you will write these three things: significance level, effect size, and the power used. So this is what was discussed in the IACDE editorial board meet also recently. These three things has to be mentioned when you write a sample size calculation. And also you need to give a reference. Usually we take a reference, or for selecting the sample size, the statistician usually will ask the key article, or based on what you have selected the sample size or a power calculation. So please quote the reference article from which you are doing your sample size estimation. Include diagrams and photographs for device evaluation or the experimental setup. Sometimes your methodology can be described in the figures, as I'll show you some examples. See, this is a figure or the schematic representation of your entire methodology. It is a very good tool to be used, because sometimes if you write your methodology pages together, the reviewer, if he is not good, he or she may not understand. That is not actually your problem. A reviewer should know when they review the manuscript, but sometimes, most of the time, we get some comments which are not acceptable. It is a common thing what we see. This happens because the reviewer is not well versed in that particular area. So to avoid that, what we can do is we can put one schematic picture like this, as I am showing in you my slide, so that it will be very easy for the reviewer to understand also, and you won't get a comment back. I will show you some of the other pictures. See, this is the previous picture, what I showed you. Okay, this one was of a push-out bond strength, how a tooth is sliced, and we fill the material and we check for the push-out. This is how we slice the tooth longitudinally, again cut it to 3 halves, embed in the acrylic and check for the shear bond strength. See, this is again a schematic diagram for micro leakage. Okay, when you describe the micro leakage, if you put this diagram, it will be very easy for the reader to understand, or a reviewer to understand. See, these are all the examples I have taken from the articles which have come for me to review. Again, in this study, they have checked for the efficacy of post-endodontic restoration with different thickness. So this is the schematic representation they have done, which is very nicely, if you read the article, you can understand, the reader or the reviewer can understand what the entire methodology is about. See, this is a schematic picture representing the methodology. So when you have a complex methodology, always better you put a schematic picture like this, so that it will be very easy for the reviewer to understand. The next point, what you need to think is the manufacturer's detail. So when you write the manufacturer details, the common mistake what I see is nobody writes in depth. See, these are the examples what I am showing you here, paper points. No, manufacturer details, dense ply. This is not the right way to write. Dense ply should be written along with the company name, dense ply, the state where it is manufactured, the country where it is manufactured. That is dense ply, Baligus, Switzerland. Same thing, see the loop hardness tester. This is the machine what you are writing. Again, in this, they have not written the city in Japan. The Tokyo was missing. So this is the right way of writing. You should write the state as well as the country name of the product what you are using. The next part is the results and statistics. So when you come for the results and statistics, the common thing what we see is we repeat the methodology part in the results and statistics portion. Don't do this mistake. Do not write anything about the methodology in the results. In the results, it should be pertaining only to the results what you have derived from your study. You can divide the results into subsections if you are having multiple parameters. In some of the studies, you might have a primary outcome and you might have a secondary outcome. So in such type of studies, always you should write the results of the primary outcome, which is the main part of your study, followed by the secondary outcome. So by dividing your results into subsection, it will be very easy for the reviewer to understand. Tables and figures are the most effective way to communicate the results. It is always better you show your results in a form of a table or in a form of a figure. Okay. Sometimes you may need to add both, or sometimes only one is enough, either table or a figure. Relevant information in a figure, that is means, median, standard deviation, standard error, interquartile ranges. All these things, what you put in your figure should be written in the result section. Most of the time, we don't write all these things, statistical items in the results. It should be written. Describe the results based on the statistical significance value. That is a probability value or the p-value. Some of the manuscript, what I have got, they just write the results based on number. For example, 30 versus 10. They say this group had 30, this group had 10. That is why this group is better than this. No, that is completely wrong. 30 versus 10, there may not be any significance when you do a statistical analysis. So always write your results based on statistical analysis and not by the mere number. Include one sentence of conclusion at the end of each subsection. As I said, in your results, if you are having multiple parameters and if you are writing your results in subsection, always it is better to write one conclusion sentence in the end of each subsection of your result. So by doing this, the reader or the reviewer can understand, and he or she will be very, very impressed also. Do not repeat the same data present in the tables and figure. If you are repeating, if you have something to say in figure and same thing if you want to tell in table, do not do that. Right? Mention only in either figure or table. Do not use both. Always mention the negative findings if they are providing essential information in the scientific community. Most of us are very scared to present our negative findings. You know, if you do a study and if you get a negative findings, we are scared whether if you write that, paper might get rejected. Don't be scared to write the negative findings. Sometimes the negative finding itself might be a groundbreaking research. It might be a very good information for that particular research. So always write the negative findings also of your study, what you have got. Define the statistical terms, abbreviation and symbols, as I said before. Mention the significance level tested. Again, I told you should write your results based on the p-values. Specify the statistical software package and the versions used. Whichever package you are using and whichever the version you are using, the latest version you have to mention in your results. Next part of the manuscript is the discussion, which is the heart of your manuscript. Okay. So do not, in the discussion, sometimes what happens is when we don't know what to write in discussion, because sometimes we get results which we are not expecting. We find this should have come good or this result should have come good, but it comes in another way. So at that time, most of the time manuscript, when I read, they don't know what to write in discussion. So what common mistake people do is they start repeating the results, writing results in the discussion. Don't do that. Do not repeat any introduction or any results in the discussion part. Do not get carried away in discussion. Like in thesis, PGs will write pages together of discussion. It is not at all connected. Do not write like that, because again, I'm telling you, no reviewer will have patience to read your long discussions or long introduction. The discussion should provide thoughtful understanding of the findings. Write the relevant findings, why you got the results, why you got this particular result, what might be the reason. That has to be written in depth in the discussion. The discussion should state whether the hypotheses were verified or the proven nature, or it is untrue. The beginning of the introduction, you will writing a hypothesis. So whether you accepted or whether you rejected the hypothesis which you have stated in the beginning has to be mentioned in the discussion. Explore the possible mechanism for your findings. You need to discuss. This is what I said. This is a very, very important aspect of the discussion. You need to discuss why you got this particular result in the study. What might be the reasons? So that has to be discussed in the discussion. Emphasize new and important aspect of your study. What new you got from your study? What important findings you got from the study? That has to be highlighted. Compare your study results with the previous findings from other similar researchers. Remember, whatever study you are doing, it will be somewhat similar to somebody else's study also. You might be using here and there slight changes, but there will be some similar studies which have been done before. You have to quote those articles and you have to discuss. But when doing this, remember, common two mistakes what we do is we criticize others' work. Do not do that. Do not criticize others' works too much. At the same time, do not boast about your work also too much. This is a common mistakes what we do. We tend to say our work, this is the result we got, very important results we got, very important finding. Don't do that. nor don't criticize other works very badly also. Okay, that is very unethical. Mention the limitations of your study. Remember, any study you do, any study which gets in any reputed journal, if it gets published also, there will be some limitations. No study can be perfect. So you have to write the limitations for your study. The other common thing what we see while reviewing is marketing your findings. This commonly happens when we do lab-based studies, in vitro or ex vivo studies. See this example. Since the results of this in vitro study demonstrated increased microhardness and fluoride release from glass ionomer cement tested, it can be used in patients who are prone for caries with high masticatory force. This is directly picked up from one article which I got for review. It is a simple study where they evaluated for the microhardness and fluoride release in lab, in vitro. But they are telling it can be directly used in patients. That is wrong. They have not done any clinical study to say this sentence. This is called as marketing your findings. Do not market your findings unless you have clinical evidence to say that. If you have enough clinical evidence, then only say this sentence that it can be used in patients. Discuss on negative findings. This is what I said. These are the two classical examples of how negative findings has to be stated. See the first example, which is taken from International Endodontic Journal. This study is limited by the fact that mere short-term treatment outcomes were evaluated. See, very nicely, they have mentioned the negative findings. They have mentioned that more long-term results has to be done. Long-term studies have to be done. That is how you need to write the negative aspect of your study. See the second example. Single root canals were used with simple anatomies, where there was no isthmus and fins. Further studies has to be done using a complex anatomy. So this is the negative aspect. This is how you need to address the negative findings of your study. After discussion, the next part, what you write is the conclusion. So when you write the conclusion, mention only the major and significant findings of your study. Do not mention the conclusion which is not supported by your data. What is justified in your results, only that has to be written in the conclusion. Do not repeat the results with statistical significance. This is again the common mistake what I see. All statistical value is written in the conclusion. This group was significantly better than that. This group was significantly, like that. Don't use the statistical part in the conclusion. Do not write that. It should be written only in the results. Explore the implications of your finding for future research. You can write the scope of your study, but remember, be careful when you write your scope. I will give you some examples which were acceptable scopes and which were non-acceptable scopes, and what happens if you write unacceptable or non-acceptable scopes. See, when you write a scope, be very careful. See this example. It is an acceptable scope. The aim of the study was to present and to investigate a histopathological changes in the pulp tissue while neodymium laser was irradiated of the pulp, and they wanted to see the effect on the dentin using a rabbit. So they used laser on an animal experiment. And the scope was further similar control studies needs to be performed on the human teeth. So this is acceptable because laser is hazardous. So you cannot directly use a laser when you don't know its limitation directly on the patient. You need to do an animal study. Once you get the findings from the animal study, if you find it is safe, then only you can do a clinical study. So the scope was acceptable. See this other example, which is unacceptable scope. In this unacceptable scope, this scope itself was a reason for rejection of the manuscript. It gave a very good reason for the reviewer to reject the manuscript. Here, the aim of this, in this example, the aim of the study was to see the efficacy of ultrasonics in removal of the debris from the root canal. See the scope, what they have said. They already know the power of the study. Based on power of the study, 80%, sample size selection should have been 25. However, in this study, they used only 10 samples, and they said further study has to be done by using larger sample. See, this is very unacceptable. In the beginning only, when you knew your sample size should have been higher, 25 teeth per group, why did you use only 10 teeth and now you are writing as a scope, further study has to be done? This is not accepted when you know in the beginning itself. So this is again an example of a non-acceptable scope where the reviewer can directly reject your manuscript. See, this is one more non-acceptable scope which was written. The aim of this study was to investigate the antibacterial activity against Prophyramona gingivalis of nanoparticles doped with calcium, zinc, and doxycycline. This was the aim of the study. And they are telling, if you read the discussion, they are telling biofilm model is for bacterial growth is the best model to test any antimicrobial agent. However, in this study, we didn't use biofilm model. Further study has to be done using biofilm model. So this is again the scope, what they have written is very, very unacceptable. When you know before you started your study that the biofilm model is the best, why didn't you use that model? Why did you go for a planktonic model and then say further study has to be done using biofilm model? This is not accepted. Again, the reviewer will outrightly reject your manuscript. So the take-home message is don't dig your own grave by writing unacceptable scopes. You will be giving an avenue or a reason for the reviewer to directly reject your manuscript. So be careful when you write the scope of your study. The next portion of your manuscript is the references. So the references is the most neglected section, if you ask me. So when I get any manuscript from any journal, what I do is the first thing I go and see the reference. I just see the reference, how they are cited. If I get a lot of mistakes in the reference, I am pretty sure the manuscript won't be written well. And this has happened for me multiple times when I am reviewing in major journals. So, and also the reviewers also will give this major comment in there. When you give the comments to the editor, under the major comments, they will write references very inappropriately written. So pay attention to the references also when you are writing. Follow the particular format of the reference format of the journal. Each journal will have its own format. Do read an article from the journal which you are submitting. It is always better, as I said in my first slide, when you are submitting your manuscript to any particular journal, always read one article from that particular journal before you start writing. If you spend enough time on that, it is worth it, but read an article so that you will come to know how exactly will be the structure of your draft, what you have to write. Usually two basic formats are there, Vancouver and Harvard. Based on this, multiple formats will evolve from different journals. But remember, do not mix these two formats. This is a common mistake what we do. We mix Vancouver and Harvard formats. Do not do that. See, these are some of the examples of my own articles in different journals when I have written. In the first article, this is from the IEJ. You can see when you write in IEJ, the full form of the journal has to be written, International Endodontic Journal. The same thing when you write in JOE, see, you can see the abbreviation. Abbreviation is written. When you write for Journal of Dentistry, it is again abbreviation, but again you see the different format of putting full stops, etc. When you publish in Journal of Dental Research, again the format is different. So each reputed journal will have its own format, but all these four formats revolves around two basic formats, that is either Vancouver or Harvard. So always read an article from the journal, the latest article, read the latest article, because the journal keeps changing its author's guidelines every now and then. So always read the latest article and then only start writing your manuscript. You can use the reference manager, Mendeley or EndNote. A lot of softwares are there where you can use and for formatting the references. Do not use old references. Always quote recent reference. This is a common comment which the reviewer will give. Do not quote old references unless and until if you feel that old reference either is the key article for your manuscript. Then you can quote. Otherwise, always quote the recent references. Limit your reference number as mentioned by the particular journal. Do not overshoot the numbers unless it is a review article. Mention number of authors as mentioned particular journal. So way of writing, as I mentioned before in my previous slide, there's a way of writing the author's name also. Some journals will tell you to write all the author's name. Some journals will tell first 3 authors, first 6 authors. So follow the particular format. Cite references for the research already published on the topic similar to your study. Always cite references for the previous study which you are quoting. Do not layer the reference. This is again one more common problem what I see when I read the manuscript is layering of the references. Layering of the references means you quote one article. For example, you can see this is the statement. Bacteria is the main cause for pulpitis. Okay. The classical reference for this article is the last one, what I have quoted here by Takahashi. But when you read this sentence, you quote one article which is not the key reference. That is, you quote, see, this is the article I got from Journal of our Conservative Dentistry Journal. They have quoted this For this sentence, they have quoted reference of this article. This article is not the key article. When I read this article, they have quoted this review. And again, this is the other reference which they have quoted. So I have to keep tracing each article to get this particular reference. Don't ever think that a reviewer will have so much time to go to cross references of your article. They will never have time. Remember that. So they will outrightly give the comments telling that your reference, what you have quoted, is not appropriate. So do not layer the reference when you are citing. Directly cite the reference which you are quoting. Pay attention to diacritical items when you write author's name. This is also very, very important. See, for example, see here, Mutlu Oscan, Michael Hulsman, Edgar Schaefer. These are all, European authors. So their names are not like written like our Indian authors. Okay, see the diacritical item. See for this Oscan, O. See, O is written with 2 dots on the above. Hulsman, see the U. You can see the 2 dots. Schaefer, see the A, where the 2 dots are there. So these are all called as a diacritical items. You need to write the reference like this. You cannot write how we write our Indian names. It is not correct. Do not cite too many of your own references. Okay, this is very unethical. I know this is a very common practice what so many of people do, quoting their own references so that your citation will increase. It is a very bad practice or very unethical practice. I do know some of the journals do ask this, quote the reference from our own journal because they want to raise up in their citation, but it is very, very unethical. You can quote your own citation if it is a real key article to be quoted in your article. Otherwise, do not do self-citations. Do not simply cite the references of authors who have used the material similar to your study. This is again one more common thing. Whenever, I've read a lot of articles on this tricalcium silicate cement, everywhere the reference is given of Torabinacek because it is easy, because he was the inventor of MTA. That is wrong. He must have invented MTA, but after that, there are so many authors who have worked on MTA. So everywhere you cannot cite the same reference of Mohammad Torabinacek. Okay, that is not correct. You have to write the reference of particular author who has done that particular study. Do not cite only review articles because we are very lazy to go and read cross references. We don't have so much time. We are so busy. So what we do, we just write review articles. That is again very, very bad practice. You cannot quote review articles for one original research study. You have to quote that particular study itself. Do not quote any review articles. Always read a reference before you cite in your manuscript. Most of the time, the reference what we are citing will not at all be correct to the article what we are quoting. Because as I said, we are so busy, we don't have time to read the reference what we are quoting. We directly take it from one more article and we'll quote it. And in the end, the reviewer goes through that and see, he will give the direct comment telling this particular reference is not matching the article what the author has cited. So the good practice is always to read the reference what you cite. They have already done the study also on this by Nature. Okay, in 2002 it was published. They saw only 22 to 23% of the authors will read their article, the reference which they cite. That means around 80% of the authors just cite the reference without knowing whether it is suitable to their manuscript or not. That is very bad practice. Always try to read the reference. The next part of the manuscript is the figures and legend. Okay, figures and tables. So make good use of figures. As I said in the beginning, using figures and table is always good in a manuscript so that the reviewer can understand your paper easily. Must visually represent the findings. What findings you are showing, I'll show you some figures, good and bad figures. It should represent the finding of your study. Do not use figures or tables simply to repeat what is found in the text, because usually in the journal, they won't have enough space. So automatically the editor or the editorial board people, they will tell just to remove your table or figure. Don't unnecessarily put figure or table if it is not required. Do not make the figure too colorful also. You can do colored figures. Some journals will accept, some journals won't accept because it is paid in most of the reputed journals. But if you're doing a colored figure also, don't make it too colorful. It doesn't look good. The figure should be large enough because when it gets published, the size will reduce so that your resolution will go. So see that the figures what you should send to the manuscript will have enough resolution. So the common question is when you need to add a figure and when you need to add a table. So figures should be added to show the trends, patterns, and relationships in the data when the general pattern is more important than the exact values. This is one area where you need to add a figure. The other area where you can add a figure is to illustrate a sequence of events, as I showed you in my previous slides of schematic diagram, or procedures, or geographical features, or physical characteristics. So in these all area, you can add a figure and you can represent your results. When you need to add a table is added to show numerous value or the data in a small space. So you have multiple parameters in your study. There are a lot of values you need to show, but you don't have so much of space in your article to show that. It's better you go for a table to show all these multiple data. Also, you can use a table to compare the values or characteristic among the groups when you have multiple groups, and also to show the presence or absence of specific characteristic. So in all these three areas, you can opt for a table rather than a figure. I'll show you some of the figures which are irrelevant figures. See, this I was 100% sure it was from an Indian author, okay? Because this I got for review from one of the journal. Because this is what we put in our thesis, okay? We say student, our PG, like all the teeth are cut and they have kept and show. Actually, doesn't have any meaning in it. If you ask me in the thesis also, we should not put such figures because it doesn't convey any message. Okay, this is one of the common irrelevant figure which I have got when I was reviewing. See, this is one more irrelevant figure, scanning electron microscope. Just to thicken your thesis, PGs will tend to put all this figure, which is not at all required. Everybody knows, every reviewer will know what is a scanning electron microscope. It is nothing new. So don't put all these irrelevant figures in your manuscript. See, this is one more figure which I got. It is an SCM figure. The title says thickness of smear layer formed on dentin surface, tungsten carbide versus diamond burr. So any one of you, when you see this figure, can you ever say the thickness of the smear layer formed on this surface? You cannot see. It is just a surface topography what this figure shows. So this is again a completely irrelevant figure to put and say thickness of the smear layer is formed with the two burrs. It is not at all required. It is irrelevant. See, this is one more which I got from, I'm sure this is again from a thesis, decoronation. Everybody knows what do you mean by decoronation. What is so great in this figure to show a erotor and a tooth where it has been nicked in the cemento-enamel junction. This is all irrelevant figures. Do not put this in your manuscript which you are sending for publication, and I feel you should not put in your thesis also. See this figure. I call this as a terrifying figure. You know how the entire figure is clumped together. You will never know what is what in this. This is using different materials they have from the materials journal. I got this. You know, entire figure is so cramped that you won't know each group what it is. So this is again a very bad type of figure to be put in the manuscript. See this figure. In this figure, a very good figure, but what I want to tell this figure is the permission. See in the red what I have highlighted. This figure, the author of this manuscript has taken this figure from some other author, but they have acknowledged the original person. This is very, very important to do. Usually our PGs do this. They directly pick the figures from the Google or somewhere else and they'll try to put in their paper or in their thesis. It is very, very dangerous. Unless you pay attention, if you don't pay attention your thesis of your student and you directly put this figure in your manuscript and you send, you might be in danger. Okay, the plagiarism or this, all this copy holder rights, everything will come into play and your manuscript can outrightly get rejected. Okay, so be careful when you pick up the figure from somebody else or from someone else or from some source, please acknowledge them. See, this is a figure which is beautiful figure when you show the diagnostic imaging. This is what I said in my previous slide. Your diagnostic imaging figure should be high resolution images so that you can easily see every aspect of your figure. This is a very beautiful figure to show of a diagnostic imaging. This is a figure when you mask. When you usually send a manuscript in original research, this won't happen. Usually it happens when we send a case report or case series. Okay. It may not be a thesis, but in general, when you send for publication, I thought this is a relevant information. That is what I'm telling you now, how to mask. We usually think masking means only covering the eyes. No, that is wrong. That is what I showed you multiple ways of masking. And wherever I have put the green signal, this is the right way. So when you mask the patient's face, you should mask eyeballs along with eyebrows, not only the eyeballs. Remember that. Okay, this is the perfect way how you can mask the patient's face when you send your manuscript or when you send a figure for publication. Figure, table, legend should stand alone with adequate information to understood without constant reference to the text. This is very important aspect when you write a figure legend. When you write a figure legend, give maximum information in a figure legend. Don't write legend very, very short. If you write a legend of a figure very short, then the reviewer cannot understand what your figure is about. Again, the reviewer has to go back to the methodology and read. Again, I'm telling you the same thing. Reviewer do not have so much time to go back and see. So they will directly give the comment telling your figure legend is very poor. So write the figure legend in detail when you are writing in your manuscript. If symbols, arrows, numbers, or letters are used in your picture, identify them clearly in your figure. I will show you some of the examples. Mention all the non-standard abbreviations in the footnote of the table. When you're using the table, you might use a lot of abbreviations, statistical terms. Quote them all in the end of the table. Always submit a list of figure legend at the end of your manuscript. So the end of the manuscript, after reference, you need to write the figure legend, and each legend should be in depth and it should stand alone. See, this is again a figure which I got from a review paper. Okay, it is just quoting smear layer removal agents. See, the figure was good, but the very, very deficient title. See, in this title, if I read, I won't know which irrigant is A, B, C, which A, B, C in each column, which is coronal, which is middle, which is apical, nothing. So the deficient title is very, very deficient when I read this figure. It should not be like this. Figure, sometimes it will be good, but the title will be very deficient. This is what I said. If you read this title, see, very, very informative title, in depth, the great title they have given for the figure. So when somebody reads this title, they will automatically come to know what this figure is about and what this study is about. So the legend should be as descriptive as possible. So this is a histopathological figure. Again, I told you in my previous slides about abbreviation. See, every abbreviation used in this figure is mentioned in the legend. Okay, dentin, cementum, pulp, inflammatory cells, all these things in depth. So when a reader reads this legend, he or she will completely understand what this figure is about. See, this is again using different marks. This is the 3D image of an apical area, of an apex of the root. They have shown with different types of symbols, full arrow, half arrow, asterisk. This is how you should represent a figure with different marks, which should be written in the end of the figure legend. See, this is one more beautiful figure, 3D image of a root canal morphology, where they have shown different parts of a root canal system with different marks, full arrow, short arrows, asterisks, all this. And all these symbols are mentioned in detail in the figure legend. So this is how a figure should be. Next thing is the composite figures. This also sometimes happen. We may have multiple figures to show in our manuscript. Okay, we may need to show a lot of figures, but the journal says you cannot use more than 3 figures or 4 figures, or if you use more figures, you have to pay. And payment for each figure might be very heavy, which we may not be able to afford. So in such instance, what we can do is we can club all the figure into one single figure, and it is called as a composite figure. See, this is again from a manuscript where there was an internal resorption cavity and they have done some regenerative procedure, etc. So they had 5 radiographs to show. They have clubbed all these 5 radiographs in a single figure and they made a single composite figure. And if you read the legend was almost a half a page of the legend where they have written in detail about the all these 5 individual figures. This is how you can do a composite figures if you have multiple individual figures. This is one more example of a composite figure where guided endodontics was done. So the entire manuscript was about guided endodontics where they had to show multiple figures. They clubbed everything into one and made a composite figure, which is again beautifully done. This is usually done. This is not endo, this is ortho. Okay, just to show you an example I'm putting. Orthodontists usually will have multiple figures to show, right from their first appointment till their last appointment. So what you can do is you can all club these figures and make it into a single figure. So this is how a manuscript has to be written from title up to the figure legend. I hope I am clear. So to conclude, I just want to tell 2 things. in research, especially when you do a research and when you publish your manuscript, two things will define you. One thing is your patience when you have nothing. Other thing is your attitude when you have everything. So you might have 0 paper with you, you might have 100 papers with you, but your attitude really matters. Do not rush with your research. Start slowly, perfect it steadily, and complete it diligently. So the take-home message from my lecture today is always be positive. Initially, you might have a lot of rejections, but acceptance will take its own time to come. So always be positive. Do not perform a study without a rationale. Why I'm telling you this is the very, very common reason for rejection of the manuscript. Majority of the manuscripts in endo or in any specialty for that matter gets rejected because it does not have a sufficient rationale. The second thing, it do not have a novelty. So always see you have a novelty in your study and there is some relevance in doing your study. Maintain research ethics. I always say this, do not do any gambling in your paper. Whatever you got the results, mention that. Do not manipulate anything in your paper. Maintain research ethics. And at last, never leave your hopes. Always you try the best, you will succeed in publication. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vasudev, for an extensive, elaborate presentation on the most pertinent topic on how to publish our hard work. And I'm sure everybody must be having questions, and there are a few posted on the thing as well. I'll straight go to the questions. So the first question is by Nimisha ma'am, that she wanted to know how to elaborate on the graphical abstract. And to which I also want to add a question. Is there a dental journal where the abstracts, graphical abstracts are accepted or are needed?
Yeah, there are many paid journals which ask for graphical abstracts. If you know, for example, I can give you one example of a publisher is the MDPI. You know, MDPI is the booming business now for publishing your papers. A lot of people send their papers for MDPI, and most of the MDPI journals do ask for a graphical abstract. Because they will show you that graphical abstract in their web page itself in front of your article. So most of the paid journals do ask for graphical abstract, but however said, the reputed journals like JOE or IEJ or Journal of Dentistry or anything, those journals do not ask usually, but the paid journals do ask for graphical abstract. That is there.
Vasu, can you please?
I think what ma'am is asking is how to, I think, elaborate on the graphical abstract. So is it a summary of, sorry ma'am, did I?
Okay, that was the question. Okay,
no,
yeah.
I wanted to ask Vasu to please stop sharing your screen so that we are visible on.
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
You wanted to know how to do a graphical abstract.
I wanted to know how to write a graphical abstract. What points to be considered?
Graphical abstract is nothing but the entire summary of your study with the figures. Okay. That is what graphical abstract means. But you need to have a software for that. And I am not a very much computer-oriented person, so you don't ask me the technical aspect how you do. But graphical abstract means it summarizes the entire abstract of your study in a pictorial form. But which software to use, I am not sure, madam, because I am a very poor computer-oriented.
Makes sense. So the next question is about stats. The statistical analysis and the results are the most crucial, and because of our limitations of knowledge, we get maximum queries. How to minimize that?
If you ask me, before you plan your study, you should consult a statistician. Most of us consult our statistician only once we do the study and we end up with some results which we don't expect usually. Some haywire results come, or to get the data, then we go to statistics. Ideally speaking, before you start the study, consult a smart statistician. The statistician plays a major role in research, because especially in designing the study, in finding the sample size estimation, and the data evaluation, or getting the data to, deriving at the data for the results. So these three areas, statistician is a must. So before you plan your study, you might have a particular plan, but the design of the study, it is always better you ask a smart statistician who knows scientific research.
I think I can add on this. I think Nimisha wants to know when we get queries from reviewer regarding statistics, I think the same statistician can actually help you answer those.
Yeah,
queries.
who has
So you
evaluated
can
your
direct those
paper?
queries to the statistician. So they will help you out with the queries, answering those queries.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think what Dr. Vasudev was saying, that when you're planning the study, think laterally and think on all the parameters which can be involved in your results, possible results. So the next question is, if your study is one of its kind, where you don't have any study to compare your results, how should we write in the discussion?
You get the results which is pertaining to your, like, it is a favorable results and you don't know why you have got that results. If it can be hypothesized by a lab-based studies, it is always better you do a lab-based study. For example, I'll give you one example from my area, because my area is on root canal irrigants. So when we work on root canal irrigants, we get some, for example, you check for the wettability of a root canal irrigant. Simple example I'll give you. You get a result telling this particular irrigant or this particular sealer wetted root canal dentin better than other particular sealer when the dentin was irrigated with this particular irrigant. So we don't know why. So we hypothesize saying that surface tension of an irrigant might be the cause. So when we hypothesize that, if we can perform a lab-based study, that if you can perform a surface tension analysis of an irrigant then and there, you can perform that and you can tell our preliminary data. You need not show that in your manuscript. You can always quote in the discussion our preliminary data or our previous pilot work, which was done on surface tension of the irrigant. It showed this was the surface tension. That is why the reason might be like this.
This will add weightage to your result as well.
Yes, it will definitely add weightage when you can do that study on your lab-based. But sometimes you cannot do. We may have to hypothesize that further study has to be done, as I said, in the scope of the study. So sometimes we need to hypothesize the findings, what we got in the results. But that hypothesis, if it can be performed then and there, it is always better to perform and say that mention that in the discussion. It will always have a higher weightage for your paper.
Okay. Sarjeev sir is asking, is it mandatory to give last access data while give internet reference?
I didn't get, madam.
Is it mandatory to give last accessed data while giving internet reference?
Date.
Madam, it is the
date.
Date, sorry,
Date.
last date, sorry.
See, giving the data, some journals do ask for the raw data. You mean to say raw data, sir?
No, he's asking when we access an internet reference, do we need to give the last access date when you're giving that internet reference?
No, need not. You can give, but it is not mandatory.
Vasudev sir,
Yes, sir.
once I had sent one article for publication. When I made that article, I could access the data, but because internet, sometimes it is there, sometimes it is not there. So he said that the editors told that if you can give us the last date, they will go into archives and set the system so that they can see it on the internet.
If to be safer part, you can give, because that is what sometimes if the data what you're giving, if there is a change in dates, same question what you ask for, they might ask the same question, what is the reference date, so that they can cross check it. But if you have it, it is always better to write it in the manuscript by the reference itself, so that you will be in the safer side. You need not get one more query from the reviewer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I've asked another very important question, that why is it so that the patents are not given if it is applied after publication, even if it is published by the inventor?
Why patents are?
Why the patents are not given if it is applied after the publication, even if it is done by the inventor? So the inventor basically...
we can direct this question to the tomorrow's speaker, because she's talking on.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next question, ma'am.
I think, ma'am, is can we use non-copyright pictures from Google without permission?
No.
See, these are all the dicey situation where, when you take pictures from Google, usually what happens is when you say this, there might be always a conflict. Reviewer might ask for the permission, and otherwise, unless and until it is a common figure where, it is not from particular person who is put in a Google like. Such things are safe, but otherwise it is always better you trace back the person or company or whichever. Sometimes people take from the companies also photographs of simple equipment or something. Even that time you need to ask the permission of the company to whether you can address this picture in your manuscript. But if you don't get any such permissions, then you should be thorough with that to say for the journal that, there is no permission for this article, for this figure or equipment or anything which is available in Google.
Amrita, there are some more questions in the question answer box.
Yes, ma'am, I was going to ask, can we ask that? Do we have time to ask, ma'am?
We can. There's no particular time limit.
Okay. So the next question is, sir, please recommend a good article for sample size determination.
There is nothing called a good article for sample size estimation, madam. That all depends on what type of study you do. When you do a study, like you will be always referring a key article. So always, if you ask me, always refer a reputed journal. This is what I say, because now there are hundreds of journals which are mushrooming up. Okay, always refer a reputed article in your specialty. So there is no particular article to refer for specific for sample size or anything else.
Makes sense. And in a case of study with longer follow-up, do we need to conduct a pilot study with the same longer follow-up time?
See, pilot study is usually done when you are not sure about, the feasibility of doing a study. That is where we do, or it is called either pilot study, or also it is called as a feasibility trial. One thing, you can do a feasibility trial to see whether your trial can, or your clinical study can be feasible or not. Or you can do a pilot study to see whether, enough sample size is required. All these things you can find out by doing a pilot study. But longer follow-up period, that you have to determine when you do study itself. It is not in the half of the study you determine, okay, I will do some more longer follow-up. That is not a correct designing of the study. Unless you get some, real findings which you are not expecting, then you can still follow up your study for a longer period with the permission from your IRB guidelines.
Yes, Dr. Vasudev. Thank you, ma'am. I think we've taken up all the questions, and Dr. Vasu has been very, very patient to answer all of them.
Thank you so much, Vasu, for such a wonderful presentation. You didn't leave any point without any this. You have touched on all the points that is relevant, and I'm sure there will be a lot more publications, good publications from now on, hopefully from our specialty. And thank you so much, Amrita, for taking your time and staying till the end for all the questions so beautifully. So thank you so much. We now move to the last day tomorrow, and see you all tomorrow for the final lecture and the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.